Welcome to our podcast, Our Story to Tell, where we share the behind the scenes of moving our family abroad and how that move changed everything for us.
We're Rissa and Tanner, an American family living life abroad with our two little adventures. From the US to Germany, Japan, and now Italy, we're sharing the real, messy, and beautiful parts of living abroad.
We're not just storytelling travelers. This podcast is about transformation and what it means to leave behind certainty and follow curiosity instead.
Yeah, we found that some of the most meaningful conversations happen in the messy middle of figuring things out. And that's what this podcast is. It's not a guidebook. It's not advice. It's a story. Our story. And we're hoping that maybe parts of it will sound a little bit like yours. So with that, let's get started.
Today's episode follows kind of our path after we decided to leave the LDS church. If you haven't already listened to our episode previous to this one, that one is a big one, covers a lot of our thoughts and the process of what it was like for us. So definitely we recommend that you start there.
Yeah, that one's really going to be setting the stage for this one and give you the perspective of what our story and journey has been like. And so with that, before we go any further in this episode, we wanted to say clearly to our listeners that if Mormonism is the religion that makes you feel the most grounded, connected, and whole, we honor that. For us, though, our story has gone differently. Our worldview became too big to fit inside the Mormon framework anymore.
And living abroad didn't cause this shift. I mean, it accelerated it for sure, but it gave us distance, it gave us time and perspective, which were all key components to helping us on our journey altogether.
Yeah, and although our journey really accelerated in Germany, it continued to shift and change, like when we went to Japan and now here in Italy. And so each country's really shaped our journey, and I am excited to kind of talk about how Italy has shaped and influenced our spiritual expansion.
Exactly. It wasn't about losing our faith. In many ways, it was about finding the style of faith that felt most aligned with us, truly authentic for us. So as an overview for today's episode, we're going to be talking about the separation of morals from organized religion, which was a big one for us because we were so intertwined with it. And then the next one will be navigating the conversations around family and friends about our beliefs. It was not easy.
We're going to be talking about how religion and faith have affected our lives in a positive way and talking about the aspects of it that we're taking with us and integrating into our daily lives. With that, we're also going to be talking about building our spiritual framework.
And while we're rebuilding the spirituality, that includes finding out what rituals, what practices, what traditions we want to have as a family. And then finally, we'll be touching on what we believe now and what we want to teach our kids and how we want to raise them. So this is going to be a really great episode. We're excited that you're joining us for today. Let's dive in.
So when we left the LDS church, we were still living in Japan and no one knew except us. There was no announcement. We didn't go and tell our families. We had 6 months where it was just Tanner and I sitting in this space. This space was new to us, of course. It was very unknown. Like we just said, it felt like the world was at our fingertips. In some ways, sure, that felt a little scary, but mostly just exciting.
The mix of emotions was a little bit of a roller coaster. We shared that in Japan for sure. It was a difficult time adjusting. The change for the job added on top of the spiritual rebuilding was a lot at moments. But like you said very well, we had a lot of excitement for what we were hopefully creating.
We are just feeling so hopeful for, I'm finding myself emotional, hopeful for a brighter future, hopeful to just kind of write our own future in our own terms.
And it wasn't we didn't have a bright future before, right? But you said that part, writing it on our own terms, felt more authentic to us as we were expanding our worldview, as we were expanding our view of what religion's purpose and drive was in life. And it's beautiful looking back now to see that growth that we've had together. And I love you so much.
We're 5 minutes into the podcast episode and I'm in tears.
Yeah. But it's a beautiful thing, I think, in so many ways to find this peace. We'll say this time and time again. It wasn't our way of trying to avoid the rules of Mormonism, to give any excuse to not have to do X, Y, and Z, because that's not the purpose. It was about finding authenticity within ourselves. And like we said in the beginning, it's about leaving the certainty and searching for curiosity in so many ways.
Yeah. Thanks for loving me throughout the emotions.
Yeah.
I feel like we're really stepping into confidence in ourselves and our beliefs at this time. And we're feeling that there's just so much out there to explore, to stand in awe of, and we're just wanting to soak it in. And simultaneously, the timing in our lives is as such where, we're moving to Italy. Emotionally, we're feeling like there's this fresh start on the horizon, and physically, there really is.
And so we kind of unofficially deemed Italy as like that new beginning. And during this time, we weren't eager to replace organized religion with another organized religion. It was more about rebuilding off of like a base that we knew we wanted, really building off of many of the Christian values that we were raised with: love, service, respect, kindness. Because a really big part of our deconstruction is recognizing that for us, our perspective, religion and many aspects of religion were created by man, created for the community, for the benefit of the community. And it was just trying to recognize which ones we wanted to continue with.
Yeah, in our previous episode, we talked more in depth about how with time, and especially because we were living in Japan, our perspective on religions definitely evolved from thinking that ours was the one true church to then expanding even outside of Christianity, where we realized that truth can be found in so many different places. And then it continued to expand to where we're finding ourselves now, in a place where religion, or at least some of the stories told within religion, are kind of created for human benefit, like you had said. And so it's been this progression, a natural progression. Living in Japan, it's hard to not have your eyes opened to life outside of Christianity. And even saying that out loud does feel intimidating, because I know that for many of you guys listening, we're going to have different opinions on that. That's okay. We respect where anyone lands religiously, spiritually. We are okay with those differences. But it does feel scary, even for us, when we allowed ourselves to think that religion might be more of a man-made thing. That was terrifying.
Yeah, it was definitely an eye-opening experience. You have to face kind of that proverbial internal battle where you're saying, I've believed something for so long, and now I'm having to accept or reject some of those feelings. It's not an all or nothing. But yeah, we went through this phase where we're starting to notice many patterns and many coincidences that we felt that way, where certain aspects of religion have been created by man, mostly for the benefit of the community, but we were noticing things that didn't align with us and seemed very, very clear that they were created for control. They were created for maybe not the best intentions. And so that was a difficult aspect. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, and that's exactly where we're at here in Italy, is we're not quick to replace it, because, we're starting to realize some of these things. But also one thing that was very important in our story was realizing that it was a choice for us to believe. And if we wanted to go to a Christian church, or say if we wanted to practice Buddhism or Shintoism, we could actively make that choice. But the way that we would relate with religion would be completely different if we chose to. Our relationship with Mormonism was so intertwined. It was our identity. We've said that many times in our podcast.
But for us here in Italy, there would be more of a separation between identity and more of the desire to learn, to be in a space to grow, develop, and maintain morals and values, rather than being this, I'm 100% this. And that felt better. It felt more aligned with what we want to be and how we want to raise our girls, is giving them the opportunity to learn about different religions, cultures, but take away the best parts of many things. I think that's what we really are trying to connect on, is within every religion, we see so much truth, so much great ritual, so much great community, that we want certain aspects of it. And although that sounds amazing from the outside, it's a little more complex, because when you're not within the same group of people believing and practicing the same thing week after week, you don't get that full true sense. In my opinion, you probably won't get that full true sense of community within that religious scope. So navigating those differences has also been on our mind, and something we're continually, I feel coming to terms with as we are expanding.
So rebuilding our spirituality outside of the church. In order to do that, we started to ask ourselves questions. The big main golden question would be, what do we believe now?
And that's continuously evolving. I think that's something we also tried to answer in small portions. We tried to attack it from more of a, okay, what feels good to me? And in some ways, it was easier to identify with things that we didn't believe, right? And maybe you noticed that in the previous episodes, kind of the sense of finding it a little bit easier to identify with things that we don't believe, because for so long we said, I believe this, I believe X, Y, and Z within the Mormon faith. So for us, it was a little bit easier to start with, I no longer believe this. I'm choosing not to believe this. And then it actually became much easier to then say, all right, I do hold on to this. This still feels good.
Yeah, we started to ask ourselves, what things do we want to take away from Mormonism? Like, let's start with the LDS theology framework and build on to that. We started to ask ourselves, what things do we want to take away from Mormonism that we really love and still think are amazing attributes to the LDS church? And then in addition, what are things we want to leave behind, like you said? And then also looking outside with all of our travels and worldview, what are other things from other religions that we also want to start to do? Because they weren't part of our framework growing up, but now we found so much good in them. Let's apply that to our lives now. And then maybe even most importantly, what does spirituality look like when no one's prescribing it? Personally, I knew that I really wanted to build my spiritual framework because I do think it's a really important component to oneself and to their health.
So the first few months moving to Italy was kind of like that reset we've said several times, but it was more than that because it slowly began to make us realize that in order for us to be fully authentic to ourselves, we needed to decide when we were going to share this news with family. We came from a very strong family who was active in the church. And so many of them still being in that space, we knew it was going to be a difficult conversation for both us to try and find a way to respectfully share that with them and also anticipating what kind of reactions there would be.
We were really trying to be sensitive to our feelings and our emotions. We didn't want to rush into the process if we didn't feel ready for it. So it did take months, like half a year to feel ready. I feel like we had to really sit and be comfortable in this decision, build up that courage. Because like you said, we knew it would be emotion-filled and difficult. And if someone was to ask for advice, that's what I would say is don't rush it, take your time, make sure you're sure and ready. But eventually it did get difficult to have conversations with family members, those who we want to be the closest with, to not be sharing such a huge decision and a huge part of our lives.
Yeah, exactly. Like if someone was sharing the big news about an event that they were doing or a big aspect of their life, like we would hope that they would share it with us. And so we were using that a little bit of a mentality while also being sensitive to the sensitivity of the topic of religion. The conversations weren't easy. Like as we expected, they weren't the easiest to share. Definitely some were easier than others just because of the frequency of communicating. There was an aspect of like, I hope that this doesn't go south because for those who know within religious organizations, not unique to the LDS faith, if someone shares in their Orthodox family that they're making a decision to leave, it can be ostracizing and relationships are fractured. So that was definitely on a forefront of ours, is trying to make sure that we were being open so that we could still maintain the type of relationships we had.
Yeah, these conversations taught us a lot. For one, just how to have hard conversations with people, which I think is so important, especially in a political world today. Like we need to know how to have hard conversations. And for us, this was one. And it did teach us how to be so respectful and also not shrink ourselves to conform to someone else's beliefs. So we're trying to hold space for both, which I think was really good. And we can say very gratefully that it was received with love.
Yeah, like the overarching message from everyone was that we love you. Your decision does not change our love for you. Although I'm sure internally it has some difficulty with maybe coming to terms that we have maybe a different belief. But overall, we absolutely are happy that that was like the overall message.
Yeah, it felt very needed to hear that. And my heart goes out to anyone who hasn't received that.
And at the same time, I think it's important to mention that just because it was received well now doesn't mean that in the future we won't have to have additional difficult conversations where we have to set boundaries about what's being taught to our kids or what's being talked about and so many other aspects that we could talk about for a while. Like we are setting the boundaries of our spiritual framework, right? Just like we did before, we are trying to redraw those lines. And yeah, difficult conversations will hopefully come up because that's how growth happens. But the initial one was, I would say, overall, not easy, but well received and well loved.
When we would have these conversations with family members, they would ask, well, like, what do you believe now? And the answer is continued to be the same. We don't really know, but that also feels good to us because for so long we've just always known that to not know feels relieving and freeing and exciting. But it is kind of funny that still months later, 6 months since this decision has been made, yeah, like that's where we're sitting.
Yeah, but we felt confident enough to go ahead to have the conversation because it was no longer like, well, maybe we'll go back. Maybe we'll accept everything and just count this as like a very stressful time, a stressful move. We're adjusting as young parents still. Like it was more than that. So to have that answer go to them was nice. I think in so many ways, even from that time to now, we're still continually growing and progressing, which feels good.
Yeah, I feel like for us, the reason we were sitting in this I don't know stage for so long was because the more we learned, it felt like the less we knew. And so it wasn't that we weren't starting to, try and build our framework. When we learned more, it had us asking more questions, and in a sense, it was like, we don't know. Like let's keep looking. Let's keep trying.
Deconstructing or expanding of faith shouldn't be something that happens in 6 months to a year, right? It's a lifelong journey, but I would say like the foundational paving has to take time, right? And so as we're practicing what we're testing out, if you want to call it that, we find out what we like, what we don't like. I think it's a really fun way to see how you can grow. And I'm very happy, like the progression that we've made.
And I love that you said it's forever happening because at the end of this episode, we're really going to be sharing more of where we sit with what we believe. But that also comes with the caveat that it might change. Our framework and our rebuilding will continuously be happening. And I also should say that our deconstruction is still happening. Even though Japan and Germany were like our main deconstruction eras, there's been so many conversations we've had in this year that we've both realized, oh man, like we kind of have to deconstruct that. So I think both things are going to be true. We're going to be deconstructing and we're going to be rebuilding forever.
So I know we've kind of gone back and forth a little bit about starting Italy and then a few months in, but our first week coming into Italy, we both had the mindset that we were going to find friends and try to make friends like early. But more specifically, because of the space we were in, we were honestly hoping to find non-LDS friends.
I feel like we were looking for space because we knew that church topics were still like a sensitive issue for us. And I do think the meaning of it was also deeper than that as well. I was wanting relationships that allowed me to build myself up without the LDS belief filters or cultural expectations. Things like being able to go get coffee with a friend at a cafe in Italy, that seemed really fun and completely new to me. At this point, we'd never had coffee before. And I was open to that experience, an experience that many humans around the world are able to have. Although that was in no way a reason for us leaving the religion, it also was something that just seemed exciting and fun.
Yeah, it just didn't carry the same weight.
Some other examples would be like drinking with friends, having a game night, not having the choice of drinks be like a moral issue, your choice of clothing, dress. We talked about like garments and our experience with them. In general, we were just hoping to kind of leave that behind us. However,
ironically, within the first week of being there, I ran into somebody at the in-processing center taking care of some other logistical stuff. And within the first few minutes of conversing with this person, somehow we're sharing that we both had served missions and that they're Mormons and that they have kids our age. And flash forward, they're some of our best friends that we have here now.
We have to laugh about the coincidence. And it is kind of funny because when people leave the church, like us, sometimes they talk about it like we are and like we've done. We have a podcast. We're talking about our story. We're always taught to share our testimony that I feel like when someone leaves, it's just been such a huge part of our lives that they're sharing their testimony of change in another way. Anyways, with that happening, a lot of members will be like, they can leave the church, but they can't leave it alone. And I feel like in our case, we left the church, but the church could not leave us alone.
It was a little funny coincidence that, we're grateful for. But at the same time, we're also realizing that because we have so many similarities, there's so many conversations that we didn't plan to have about religion when we're over here. And it's been healing, and it's been really good for us to still be able to talk about it openly and to still have great, healthy conversations about our decision while also respecting the space of where others are at.
And we've also been able to create some of those other friendships that we've hoped for as well. All of our friendships have allowed us to be fully ourselves, like where we're at now. And that's been very healing to just feel safe in a relationship. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, I went with a friend and we had ourselves a little coffee date. So a little piece of me healed. Now it's been a year that we're in Italy and I'm like having some of those experiences I hoped for. How beautiful is that?
So as the name of this episode suggests, part of the first few months is trying to identify the parts of our spirituality that we want to build and keep and build upon that. Of course, knowing us, we are definitely lovers of travel, lovers of food. And so that aspect was going to remain the same. But in addition, we were going to find ways to try and add upon it.
Well, I feel like we were just noticing like travel and food, it actually is a spiritual thing for us. Like being able to view it from the lens. Some might say like romanticizing your life. I feel like that's kind of what we were doing because we were realizing, oh, we're doing these things that add and bring spirituality into our lives. Let's look at them through that lens and build on it, expound. So for example, doing a puzzle with our daughter. She loves puzzles. Sure, not every day is going to be like this most magical spiritual moment, but it is a spiritual thing if you view it from that lens. And going out on a nature walk and feeling the fresh air and seeing the beautiful world, that is spiritual.
Yes, we definitely connect with nature. And I think a lot of it has to do with like, there's life everywhere, and life is so fascinating to like study it, to watch it, to see things grow and change. Has a lot of spirituality within it because it's being born again. It's like having a lot of the same messages that we're taught of like changing and starting over. Seeing nature and seeing things in that lens allows you to feel that spiritual like recharge.
And I would say I've even now living in Italy found spirituality in being at a farmer's market and having a gelato with our girls and just like slowing down and taking in our location. I feel like Italy's been a beautiful place to do this because in general, the culture is a little bit more slower and mindful. Even the infrastructure, like yes, we love nature as well, but to be in Italy, what a privilege for us. And it just is so beautiful everywhere, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we are in Veneto. This is like close to Vicenza. This is like Palladio, like a great architect, very famous in Italy. The White House was designed after some of like his designs. And yes, there are so many parts of like the community, parts of Italian history in general that can all be kind of intertwined in like this awe and this amazement that can invoke feelings of spirituality.
It felt like the difference between like our normal lives that already included these things versus now how we're viewing them was just being intentional and being maybe a little more slow with that. That was nice to see. We're already doing it. Let's just build on that.
Yeah. Intentionality, I think, has been huge for us. When you are going to do something, if your mindset is facing that, if you're looking for that, you're going to feel more of the change. Just like if you're going for a walk and your intention is to like forget about the news, forget about the world, you're likely going to feel better after that walk versus I find myself sometimes catching up on emails or reading messages and I don't feel that charge. So it's like the intentionality of every action, not getting too crazy, but the intentionality with most of the actions has been huge for us.
So we start looking at the things we're already doing with more intention. And then we start asking ourselves, what specifically do we want to take from the LDS church? One of those things was the ritual of Sunday church. Now, our church with our family does look different. Obviously, we're not going to a physical building, but we decided that we wanted to make a routine Sunday walk for our family with a moral lesson.
Yes, and honestly, for the past few months that we've been doing this, it has proven to be very good for both of us, I think, to set that intentional time. The purpose almost regardless of like what the weather is. We're trying to do this so that it can set more of like a tradition and a ritual for our family.
When we were going to church, we were going to primary lessons. They were talking about morals and values. And one of my concerns with not raising our kids in a church was not having that. So it was kind of twofold, right? Being able to have designated family time outside in nature, a place that we love and find spirituality with. And then having intentional lessons with topics that our kids would find in church, but in a way that we know aligns with what our family goals and values are.
Yeah, and for the most part, it goes well. The girls have their ups and downs, whether they want to go on a walk or not. But we have noticed that as we've done it more and more, they become more excited, more used to it. Sometimes it involves a bike ride rather than a walk, and it's been nice.
Another thing that we looked at is family home evening. So growing up, Mormon church, Monday is like the designated night for family home evening. Some families do it religiously, some don't do it at all. It's something that was encouraged. With that would be maybe like another moral lesson.
Definitely a moral lesson.
Sometimes they're opened up with prayer or closed with prayer. Sometimes a song if they're really like being...
She's looking over at me because this is describing Tanner's youth perfectly. I remember very few times where we weren't having some sort of like mini moral lesson and activity during like a Monday night. But most of the times it would be, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, we would sit down, we would have a prayer, we would sing a hymn, like from the hymn book or the primary songs. And then we would have a moral lesson and activity. And I remember at this cute little house that my parents would have, and like each person had their own little heart, wooden heart with like their name on it.
Yeah.
And then you'd put it on like the hook, and each position on the house was a different activity. Thought, lesson, treat, activity, song, prayer. So
Yeah.
it actually worked out well, just the size of my family. I loved it in a lot of ways. It was nice because you're at home, you could be more comfortable. It's not like you're going anywhere. Side tangent there. That's exactly what it was for me, but other families had it more relaxed and maybe not as official, maybe not as consistent.
People that we've met that didn't grow up in their religion, when we say, we were Mormon or we used to be Mormon, they say all the Mormons that we've met are like awesome, amazing people. And so here we are now, and we're reflecting back on the things that we want to take. And it's these things like family home evening that I really think are building amazing people and amazing individuals because they're focusing on family, which is huge. And they're just talking about being a good person. That's one thing we want to take. What that looks like for us now is like a once a month, we have a theater night. And it's maybe more of an emphasis on music and creativity. We do like little on the spot stories or impromptu skits, music videos, just like fun things that are kind of, at least for me, putting me outside of my comfort zone, but they're giving our kids time to play together as a family, to have some of that music in their life. We like to listen to music, but I do miss going to church and singing in a congregation. So maybe we should start opening these up with some sort of an equivalent of a hymn.
We're going to do a karaoke? Is that what you're going to do?
Yeah, maybe we should start karaoke night. That's a good idea.
No, there's definitely the sense of community when you're singing in a big group. The feelings that come with singing a song that has like purpose and stuff definitely is a good feeling. So in many ways, yes, this is our, at least for now, like the frequency that feels good for us. Because if it's like every week, it can become a little overwhelming sometimes. Maybe you like set yourself up to feel a little bit of like failing if you're not doing it every week, right? So that's another thing that we recognized we didn't want to have, was that we didn't want to add on to like our Sunday church, at least right now with the age of our kids and just like our phase of life.
Yeah, we didn't want things to feel rigid or like that we had to with it. This is intentional time that we just want to make special and fun and safe for our girls and our family. And right now our kids are at the age where they're home. We get a lot of family time, which we love. And hopefully we're setting the stage for when that busier season comes, that they know this is the night that is the family night. And every Sunday we're going to do this. And Tuesdays, also another thing we did was a candlelight dinner.
Yeah, having a candlelit dinner is really fun for when the girls it's like exciting. It's a change up from like the everyday, which I think is also important. Then it's also gives you like an opportunity to talk about and reflect about the day and like your intentions, which is not unique to just Tuesdays for us. That's actually something we're trying to do more on the daily.
When we're having breakfast with our girls in the morning, it will be fun to talk about intentions and what we hope to do. And then that evening, kind of reflecting back on them. Just again, being more intentional with our perspective, how we want to approach the day, what goals we want to make. It is fun. I think it's shaping their minds to realize that if they go into things intentionally, they can, try and reach their goals.
Yeah, and I think it's also been very important for myself as well, because a lot of times in the past, like I would go to work pretty early before like the girls would get up and go to school. And now I'm trying to set, a day or two at least during the week where I can have breakfast with everyone and we can like do that all together. It's not always possible, but when I have the option to try and do it, and I do recognize that like by verbally setting your intentions, it often has a positive impact on the day.
So then the other idea that we had, we actually didn't end up doing it, but we thought about enrolling Willa into Girl Scouts. Now, the reason we didn't do it was just because she's 6. We didn't want to be held to so many of our evenings at activities for her because we'd love to just be able to savor this time as a family. But it is still on our minds to have her attend something like Girl Scouts where they're focused on service projects, because growing up, there were so many service opportunities for us, especially as youth. I think that's super valuable to have them look externally, be able to help other individuals. And where we are now here in Italy, it's kind of difficult for us to find service opportunities, and Girl Scouts seemed like a good fit.
Yeah, we've definitely been thinking about that one, and probably when they get older, or if we happen to find another group that's very similar to it, that will be ideal. In addition to that, as we talk about service, trying to look for opportunities to like help with cleanups, because that was always a big one for us, like a spring or a fall cleanup. That is one aspect that we both do miss, and we are trying to find ways to incorporate service into our daily life.
So in the end, it is more work for us as parents to intentionally create service opportunities, moral lessons for our kids, like planned activities with our family. But we think that framework is really valuable, and it's something that we want to have in our lives. And we feel like if not, there would be that missing void, because the church does do a great job of creating those opportunities.
Absolutely.
We would love to hear from you guys. Write in the comments below what traditions, what rituals, experiences you're creating for your families, maybe things you grew up with. We would just love to hear.
Yeah, that would be amazing. We have found that by reading the experiences of others, that's in some ways how we've created one of them, which we'll actually talk about here in a few minutes. One conversation that gets brought up often, and we've read it online and kind of experienced it, is when you leave religion, you're kind of leaving this framework of morals and values. People might say in a nutshell, like, how are you going to like have your kids be raised to be good moral people? Like, how are you going to find ways to make that happen for them? And what's been nice for us, and in so many ways beautiful, we've been able to separate that. We've been able to separate the idea that religion has this monopoly on good morals and values.
I remember when I had that light bulb moment, realizing that the LDS God did not hold all of the monopoly on raising good moral people. That was a big light bulb moment for me, crazy enough, because we'd already had traveled so much up until that point, but to really have it sink in was a big thing. And then we did it again in Japan, where we talk about, oh my gosh, Christianity doesn't even hold the monopoly on this. Like, we see it everywhere. So then, yes, it's been so beautiful and great for me to just realize that us as humans, I genuinely believe that we are born wanting to be good people. We're wanting to have high values and morals, and we're wanting to live a kind, happy life. It's just, unfortunately, everyone's scenario is different, and it doesn't work out that way. And maybe people forget, and bad, terrible things happen. And so it does take teaching it. It does take communities and environments that foster this. But how great for us as we're leaving a religion to feel like we can be confident knowing that we can still raise amazing humans without it. Religion can absolutely nurture it, but it isn't required.
Yeah, I think that's been something we've taken time to realize and put into practice. Everything that you want out of life comes from your effort and your intentionality with it. And I think it's been nice to see how the rituals and practices are shaping us in our lives.
Yeah, I absolutely love the thought of raising thoughtful, compassionate kids, and like I said, humans, our children, without some of the fear-based beliefs, without some of the obedience-driven morality. Like we can do it in a way that aligns with how we feel now.
Yeah, not because we're being told that's the way that we have to live because of fear of punishment from God or fear of not being able to receive all of the blessings, but because like that's just what people need to do. Like for communities to survive and thrive, like that's just what needs to happen. For families, we start even lower. Individuals have to show ourselves compassion and love and all these good moral lessons, right?
And our answers to our kids' questions when they say, well, why? Why do we have to do this? It's not because we're told to. There's more of a reason behind that. And that does feel really nice for me.
Yeah, and maybe that's even in part kind of like our separation from like the theological side where although I still agree that like being termed commandments, a lot of those good morals and values helps and in some ways kind of falls under that umbrella of like man created rules. I still find so much value in all of the 10 commandments, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's again, before maybe the term was coined or put into like a language that we understand, we also have to recognize that part of humanity is the innate ability to love and nurture, even before we've made a long list of specifics. Like the initial desire, I feel like everyone is to feel loved and included, you know?
So in our latest episode, we talked about how for a time we kind of stopped praying. Prayer didn't really align when we were praying for things in like abundance or for small trivial things, and other people were praying for survival or life-threatening things. But very soon after, we missed the ritual of prayer, and so we started to rebuild prayer in a way that worked for us. So before we took a pause on praying, we used to pray to both the Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother. Now here in Italy, we opened up our prayers at first that same way because that still felt right and okay. But now it's evolved over time and we open up our prayer just by like starting to give gratitude. And so it's not to someone or something in specific. Although I would say in my mind when I'm still praying, I do love the idea of someone, people, something listening. Like maybe I'm even throwing good energy out there, but it's more so even for the practice of what prayer provides, which is intentional time to give thanks, intentional time to slow down, be reflective, think about the things that we're grateful for in life.
Yeah, and it's not to say that we don't believe that someone or something is not listening, but it's just more of like I would say at least right now, it's more of the phase that we're in. It's more of this transitional time where we still want to keep that practice up. We still want to set the intentionality of being grateful and recognizing that what we have is something to be grateful for, to not take things for granted, and set like the framework for not only our girls, but to remind ourselves of what we had. It's kind of shaped the way that our perspective on prayer looks like. And although it has 90% of the same structure, it has 90% of the same words, we're being a little bit different with how it's phrased, and it does seem more authentic and just nice to express it that way.
Yeah, we're not praying with the thought or belief that something or someone is actually going to be intervening necessarily. I haven't given up complete faith in the possibility. I still feel like I could believe in miracles or the coincidences of life. I don't know. That's still something that I'm, I guess, thinking on. And who knows where I'll land in the future. But it's more so that we've recognized that that ritual does have benefit. It, in a sense, makes us feel like peace and safe and familiar.
And more than anything, I think it's the recognition for our daughters to see that like reflecting before meals has more than just benefits for gratitude. It has a lot of like intentionality behind it and allows people to slow down, I think, too.
Yeah, even in Japan, remember they have a little saying. Do you remember what it is?
Itadakimasu.
Is that it?
I don't remember. I think
They
so.
they like say something to give gratitude for their food. It's not like a big ritual, but it's something, and I just love the mindfulness of it. Is it doesn't have to be completely all or nothing. The place that we've landed is again something that's familiar to our past, but in an authentic way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a great mindful practice of ours. And another mindful practice has been something that we've incorporated for the last few months in the evenings. So once we have dinner and we're kind of getting ready for bed, we have this intermediate time that we first started calling it quiet time. But then we wanted to try, I don't know why it came to me, but I had this idea of like, let's try and make it a funner term to coin when we talked about it with our girls. And that's when we decided on magic time. Why don't you explain what we do during magic time?
Yeah, so magic time is typically 20 minutes that we set a timer for. The goal is to not even really talk during it, but definitely not to have electronics out, just to be in each other's presence in a calm, peaceful way. So that looks like some of us doing puzzles, reading, journaling, coloring, writing. Those are typically the activities that we're doing. Oftentimes we have soft piano or guitar music playing in the background, just calming music. And it has been so good. We've both fallen in love with it.
Yeah.
And I've noticed our girls are too.
Yeah, it's really cute to have our youngest be like, "Potty, magic time?" And just get like really excited to know that she has something to look forward to before bedtime. Because before, a lot of times it was, all right, we're done with dinner. Let's get cleaned up, brush our teeth, get your jammies on, and basically like snuggle and read books before bedtime, which again, it is adding a short thing on top of what we normally do.
Yeah.
But the mind shift has been beneficial, I would say.
Yeah, I love being able to be in each other's presence and just to feel safe. Like you just feel peaceful in those moments because, you're quiet. You have time in your thoughts to do things that you want to do, but to still be around each other. So I love knowing that our girls are getting this experience with us without words where they still feel safe.
Yeah, and I will say this is actually one of those rituals that we stole from someone's idea that they were sharing. And they shared just how impactful it was for like their teenage kids. So we thought, we'll see what it looks like for us. They did like an hour in their example that we looked at, which I feel like would be really hard at the age stage for our girls.
Yeah.
Because 20 minutes right now, 20 to 30 minutes, I think is a golden amount of time because it still allows them to get engaged in their activity or if we're doing something together. But it also allows for enough time for, I feel like, the nervous system to kind of relax.
Regulate.
It's almost like a reset for them. And it's been awesome way to prep for bed.
Plus, in some of the books that we've been reading, it's just nice in general to have this open-ended free time for them, right? Like they can be creative with it as they are learning to read, and that grows. Hopefully, it will also be an advocate for reading, for being creative in their drawing. I think there's a lot of benefits. One thing that we've now started to do at the end of our magic time is obviously turn off the timer and then we say a prayer together as a family. So at dinner time, it oftentimes is one person kind of volunteering to do the prayer. And then in magic time, we've done it where we each can rotate. And if someone doesn't want to participate, totally fine. But if they do, we can just kind of share our thoughts. And it's a fun way to end it. Sometimes we'll even do like cute little chants or like a cheer at the end.
Yeah.
And I do love that. Like, yes, it's kind of cheesy. But growing up, I'd heard of other families having like a family motto or a thing that they would say. And mine never did that, which is totally okay. It feels almost more weird to like do a chant or something with it. But I also see the benefit from it where like the family knows some of their goals and their values and it's instilled in a young age. Just in general, like we know we're on each other's team. We're doing a cheer like a team would.
Yeah, it is fun to see just like the excitement behind so many of them. And it's by far, it's not perfect. So if you're thinking, wow, my kids would never do this, we also have nights where it does not work and like it's rough. But
we're doing the puzzling with them or like we're coloring with them.
Yeah, or it's not really quiet as much as we would expect it to be.
Yeah.
But like the hope is to set that intentional time for everyone to have time away from, like, even for us, you and me, like because of the time difference, we have things going on in the States during the evening. It can be busy. It can be easy to let the evening go away where we have to be answering phone calls and emails. But setting that time up where it's like, nope, no excuses. Like, we're just setting this time up. It's been awesome. So kind of wrapping up this episode, asking ourselves another big question.
The golden question.
What do we believe? Why don't you start us out?
Well, I would say we still feel fairly content not fully knowing. I've loved living in this space.
And it's not because we don't want to make a decision. In many ways, it's because we don't feel like we need to make a decision. And I feel like it's part of growing into the new versions of ourselves and finding that pathway that feels most aligned with us requires you to take it slower. We had decades of growing up, hearing stories, lessons, having thoughtful, inspirational moments to be in the place where we were within the church. And so as we're navigating this new one, that's another realistic expectation to have, is like we're trying to do it at a pace that is sustainable, that's authentic, and that might take several years.
Yeah, we're totally honoring our timeline and there's no right way. However, I would say it does feel nice to be able to put some gentle language to where we're at now. Not any concrete labels that, might feel like they trap us, but just language that puts words to the thoughts and feelings that we've been having.
So although we're not entirely on the exact same page with everything, overall, you and I have both found a lot of overlap within being agnostic and in partial agnostic theist, which at this point we both believe that there is a higher power. We have the idea, it feels the best for us, but at the same time we recognize that it is very difficult for us to accept that it can be proven in that way. And coming to this realization has come with both relief, but also a little bit of internal battles, because we both were raised Christian. In so many ways, Christianity holds the most comfort, the most familiarity than any other belief system, because that's what we have always been identified with. And so in some part, as the name suggests, not believing that Christ has the same role as what we did 3-5 years ago has been difficult.
Yeah.
And in some ways, some people would maybe say it's like mocking or diminishing the value of Christ's role in what Christians believe as being the Savior. But for us, we still hold on to so many values and lessons that were taught by Christ. We still believe that he was a person. We still believe that he held on to some of the most important things that everyone should hold on to. But as we've continually seen things change in our lives and we've seen things from a different perspective, it's been difficult for us to count that as like the only option and answer to this incredibly complex world that we live in.
Yeah, I would say the deconstruction aspect of our Italian time has been more so on this subject as we're continuing to learn and just, build our framework. What is our perspective on a deity? I find a lot of hope in feeling like there's more purpose to something beyond just this life. However, I'm also open and not naive in the fact that there might not be, which in a sense does make this life even have more purpose. You know?
The intentionality that comes by accepting the fact that there might not be something after is, one, scary.
Terrifying.
For having the background and the belief that we've had. But in some ways, like you said, it causes you to ask the question, like, am I not living up to my life's full potential now because I'm holding on to an afterlife? Am I holding back from doing things that I would want to do during this life because you and I have an eternity to do it in? And I think that there are so many people, even within Christianity and even within the Mormon church, that have that mindset that they say, look, like, I'm maximizing both of my lives, both this one and the other one. But it would be very wrong to say that everyone does that. And I feel like for us, in a part, there was some aspects of our life that we were holding back on because, well, there are better things to do to prepare, to teach, to convert, to help people come and join the correct church, to be baptized within the correct church so that they can have an eternal happiness, that they can live forever.
Going back to your thoughts and what you shared about Jesus, I feel like for me, it's been really nice to be able to feel like I can still connect and relate to Jesus. However, it does look different now than it used to look, but I still find a lot of peace with where I'm at now, especially because our families, both of our families, for generations and generations back have been Christian, it is nice to still be able to relate with our current family, our extended family, and our ancestry, to feel like we have nothing but good feelings and thoughts about Jesus, him and his teachings. What he stood for is definitely what we want to emulate in our lives and teach to our kids. And I would say there's other teachings from other religions, like secular Buddhism, that is feeling very aligning in so many ways. We can take the teachings of Buddha and also apply that to our lives. And I want to emulate a lot of things that he taught.
Yeah, there's a smorgasbord of ideas that come from different world religions. And in all, that's part of like this process that we're taking, slowly trying to digest things as we can, whether it's reading a book about rebuilding spirituality, or it's a book about diving into secular Buddhism. Like, all of it takes time, and we are just trying to be very intentional with it. It's not the easiest question to answer, especially since within religion and within faith, especially when you are confident that one path is like the path to salvation and accepting, especially Jesus as like the savior, admitting that to each other was admitting it to ourselves, I think, was probably the hardest, honestly. It still feels like a difficult position to be in at times, just because so much of our family and loved ones are in that position still.
Yeah. I mean, Mormonism will always just be such a huge part of our lives, and Christianity will always be such a huge part of our lives. Even now, we're here in Italy in a community that's deeply integrated with Catholicism. It even shows up in our home. Like, our girls are praying their Catholic prayer in Italian. And it's so fun to be able to see the commonalities across all religions, be able to take from it the things we want to, and just respect the things that we don't.
And we have the conversations with our girls too. Like, we choose not to go to church, but other people choose to go to church for X, Y, and Z. And of course, like, as they mature, like, we're going to be very open with them, giving them like age respectful, appropriate information on it. We might not go to church. We might choose to practice like religion or faith in like a different way than others. But like, overall, we hope that they can just see that there are so many different ways to practice all of the good morals and values that we've talked about.
And they're going to be able to choose, of course, as they're older. And right now, we totally understand that what we're doing and how we're raising them is going to determine a lot of their future choices. But because our situation is as such where we've had exposure to so many different ways of life and religions, they already have a good understanding that people practice and believe different things all around.
Yeah, it's going to be living with them for their entire lives. And like, that's honestly one of our goals, is to, within religion, within culture, within food, languages, recognize that we are just so small. Like, every person is so small, so big at the same time, because we can belong to a certain community, nationality, language. But at the same time, like, it's just important to recognize that like, each individual circumstance is different. It's unique. And everyone gets to decide what works best for them within reason. And that's part of like being human. That's part of what makes the world so diverse, and necessarily diverse, I would say. So
to wrap up this episode, we're wrapping up a major part of our story. Of course, we're going to be talking about spirituality and our thoughts, and, we'll reflect back on our past. But this is really like wrapping up a lot of it. And we wanted to kind of end it out by saying, like, when we left Mormonism, we didn't step into emptiness. Like, yes, we left a lot behind, but we stepped into a lot of possibility. And that's where we are now. And the journey to get here has been so difficult, so emotional. It's came with a lot of feelings of pain, grief, anger, frustration, but it's also came with a lot of expansion.
A lot of relief and peace at a lot of times too.
Really, that expansion is what pushed us to do this podcast, is to talk about these moments and how it is important to step into the uncomfortable, to step into the uncertain, because the end result can be really worthwhile. So like, I started the podcast out in tears. I'm ending it out, but these aren't tears of sadness. It kind of takes you back to just those emotions. And it's been a lot, like we said. But these are also like really proud tears. They're happy tears for where we are and where we've landed. Yeah, I am proud of us.
Yeah, it's been a journey. We're so happy and excited for what the future's going to bring because we really have so much control over like our mindset. Of course, there's so much that's out of our control, but by focusing on the things you can control, that's something that you do a really good job of telling me time and time again is like, Tanner, like focus on what you can control and everything else doesn't need to stress you out as much. More or less, you say something
Which
like that.
feels kind of hard in this world that we're at right now. But it's true. We can only control what we can control.
And you can be an influence for many aspects of your life to change, right?
Yeah.
They'll change slowly most of the time, and that's what's beautiful about our journey and us sharing this with you. We love this platform that we've created, not just for the travel, not just for the food or for the experience, but really for something that relates with everyone. A belief system is had, whether you choose to have it or not. It's created and it's formed by your everyday experiences.
And it can change, which I think is a beautiful thing, is that you can be the leading force into your life, whether you believe there's an afterlife or whether you believe this is the only life we have. Like, how beautiful that we get to decide. And I feel like for us, for a long time, our spirituality looked like something to live up to. But now spirituality is something that we're living and leaning into.
So with that, we hope you guys will join us for our next episode where we dive into more of our life here.
Ciao, ciao.